Oh, my computer didn't even show that you were in the room. I'm so glad I wasn't talking, John. Um,
What was the original question?
um,
I was just saying that she was saying that we didn't have to have for our homework to hand in to you to see where we are. And I was saying that, but we're gonna, well, the way Nathan explained it to me, when we put it in the GitHub, we're gonna put the front end in GitHub and then we're gonna put the back end in GitHub. So I was saying at least have a back end to put in GitHub, because then that means you're not gonna have it and you may have to go back and look at the slides. So it'd be easier to just set up the back end, the basics of the back end.
Yes, yeah,
Right.
that's a good point, Christy. And Shantina, to your point, it doesn't need to be integrated into the front end. So you don't really need to be like making a fetch and a round trip call and all of that kind of stuff. But yes, it probably isn't a bad idea to have both your front end and back end set up just to the point where you can say, hey, on the back end, if I go to localhost 3001 and get a hello world back, that's probably the most you need to do. But Nathan is going to go through starting next week on connecting to the database as well. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Okay.
Larry, go ahead.
Look, everybody put their hands up.
Let me share my screen.
Line.
All right. So when I was going through this data, I realized that there's, and I know you work with bigger ones, but there's probably over like 40,000 items in a particular Wegmans. And yeah. So I was trying to create create something that would take maybe 10 categories, 10 items, put them into an array, and then write a file, like a JSON file with that, with those items.
Okay.
All right. So far, I've been able to limit the number of categories, and the number of items. So I just, did a fetch, got the data, did a splice on it, so I can limit it down to like the first 2 or 3 things. Mapped over it, created an empty array. Then I went, and this was something that, all right, let me slow down. So this was something that I had an issue with too. So I was trying, instead of just creating a whole new function for getting items, I was just trying to write the code to do it in there. And without making another async function inside of that map function or function callback, it was saying that await was a keyword that I couldn't use.
Correct. So because it's always the parent function. So if you want to use await here, you would need to put an async up here without this function in here. However, if you're using the return of the map to generate a new array, you run into some issues. So my suggestion for getting around that is, instead of using a map, you would use a for const of loop and then just have the empty array and push into it.
Okay, we said for const of, and I can still connect that to my slice.
Correct. Well, you would slice your data.items, get the first 3 items, and then instead of doing the map here, you would do your for const of the 3 items right here.
So would I just do like dot for const of, or would I have to?
Here, I'm gonna do a quick refactor for you.
Okay.
So you got a better idea. So I would say something like, let 3 items equal your await data here. And then I would say something like, let new array equal an empty array, and then for const item of 3 items, Oops. There we go. And then new array dot push, and then you could do your item here. And obviously you could format item or do whatever you wanted from that.
Okay. And
Or if you were doing, maybe this is a better, hold on, let me just refactor that a little bit. So I'm going to say let, because it's really the categories that you're having problem, right? So
well,
let,
I'm able to get the categories. So I don't have a problem with getting the categories or getting the items. What I was trying to do is take the items, put them in an array, and then make a JSON file out of that, so I can use that to put them in my database. So you know how we kind of, when I got the results from the stores JSON, we put that in the file and called it stores.
yep.
I'm trying to make my code write its own file with the information.
So if I say this may be a better example of, now that you've got this working, you could do your fetch here based off of the category ID. And because this is now a for loop instead of a map, you won't have any issues of using the await here.
Okay.
So now from in here, once you've got your fetch working, you could say for const item of, and then you would have to do your JSON parse here, right? So const items equals await your items response dot JSON, and then here you could say for item of items, and now you could say items like final items maybe, and then final items dot push item. Does that make sense?
I mean, I'm following what you're doing.
So I'm basically refactoring it. So instead of using .map, I'm using a for loop instead. And because for loops don't require functions to run, it will give you more access to the await keyword without running into some issues there. So the general idea is have your array before you loop over any data, have the final array that you want to push all of the data into. And then when you do your mapping over the data to parse it out and deal with it, you can just use a for loop instead. And once you finally get down to the data that you actually want, then you can push it into that final items array.
Okay, and then
This code isn't tested. It's not like going to work out of the box, but it should give you an idea of the syntax.
okay, and then after I get the items in the array, I'm trying to create a file programmatic, using code. So down here,
I don't see anything wrong with that write file. I think the only thing that you ran into was getting the data into the array, working around the promises with the map.
okay,
So your FS seems to be on the right track, and that's exactly the solution that I would have taken.
thank you. And then one thing I noticed is that it seemed like once the file saved, it would restart the server and the code would start running over again.
Ah, yes. So there is a some kind of ignore parameter that you can pass in your package.json to NodeMod.
And what would I be ignoring?
The items.json file that you're generating.
So I would just say ignore items.json file.
Yeah, I think it's going to be something as simple as ignore and then you're going to just do a, oh, actually you can do it right in here, apparently. can do a new section called ignore. And nodemon should node to oh no, it's nodemon.json. Never mind, changed my mind. Back to the original. You should be able to do ignore and then items.json. And that should work.
Okay. All right, thank you.
No problem. Nicole, you're up.
Okay, so I was having trouble on finding the correct video that would help me make a back end on my capstone, but I can show you what I have so far.
Sure.
So this is what I made so far. And just from like looking at some of the other files I had, this is all I got.
You're definitely on the right track. You're just missing your db.js. The only video I can tell you to look at was the video that we forgot to record the first half of class.
Yeah, okay.
So whatever video is like only an hour and a half-ish long instead of 2 hours long, that's probably going to be the right video. The good news is the part that we forgot to record was the front end, not the back end.
Okay, so then the other question is, so I had my capstone in a separate folder, but I wasn't sure, but I would just show you how I put it in the file. So I finally have moved it from off my desktop into my documents folder over here.
Okay.
Capstone. And then, okay, so here's the capstone, and then I
Okay.
did a capstone backend.
Okay, yeah, that's good. As long as they're two separate folders. So yep, that's good.
It's supposed to be like this.
Yep.
Okay, and one more second. Oh, and I was watching one video and it had the capstone like front end. I mean, not front end, but just, I don't know, something front end. And then you had an ad server. Was that just the back end?
Yeah, there's nothing server related on the front end.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Ad server was like going way back to like, hey, we've got an ad front end and we need an ad back end, where like you can type in two numbers and hit add together and it made the call to the back end, added the two numbers and returned the sum. So that's kind of that's going back a couple weeks before we even touched the database. But the
Okay,
ad
so-
server was the equivalent of an ad back end. And then the ad front end was literally, I think, just two inputs in HTML.
Okay, so my last question is, how do I, so it only becomes front and back end when it's in the same folder or when it's pushed up to GitHub? Because I have them in separate folders, but they're in my documents. But you know how the other ones are like in day 4 and then capstone back end and front end?
So it's a front end whenever it's running in the browser, and it's a back end whenever we started using Node or NodeMon.
Okay, so,
So it doesn't really have to deal with a file structure. Technically, you could have all of your front end code in your back end folder if you wanted to. We haven't gone over how you do that, but what makes it a front end and a back end is that it's going over the internet from 3000 to 3001. And because it's crossing over different ports, that's what technically is making it a front end and back end.
Okay, thank you.
Christy, go ahead.
My question is kind of simple, maybe too simple. What screen am I showing?
LinkedIn.
Okay, I got the wrong screen.
Cute LinkedIn picture though.
Am I in the right? Thank you. Is am I in the right spot? Okay, my question is very simple. So here's
You're still in LinkedIn.
I am. Hey,
You're just really proud to show off that you've been working on your career module stuff.
no, I haven't. Why? I thought I was on the right screen. Let me try this again. I should know how to use this. Desktop share.
There you go.
Oh my God. It's the little stuff. So, okay, here's this. Okay, I have some questions about this before I start playing around and messing stuff up. So let's see, where is it? So right in here, I tried to change the color with the arrow.
Yeah, down arrow is either a class or an ID. and you don't have that selector there. So go to your HTML and show me your down arrow.
Hold on a second. That would
Probably
be
in header.
header. And then
Were you trying to target this expand more?
so it's a span and the class name is material symbols outline.
Yes.
So that's what I would use in CSS, material symbols outline.
Well, because a lot of different classes are going to have material symbols outlined, it would be better to do something like add an ID on this called down arrow.
Mhm.
Not spelled wrong. And then here it's in this header with an ID of intro. So if
Yeah.
we look at your app.css, you've got intro, and now the down arrow that we're targeting needs to be an ID as well. So now that you've done that, you've changed your color.
How do I change the size? Because I thought I've been playing, but it probably didn't change because I didn't have it named correctly.
So that's true. This should be just a font size because we're using material icons. So yeah, that made it bigger.
It should, that other line could be removed.
What? This?
Yeah, well, back to the. So this can be this bottom 75 pixels. What is that?
That's what's positioning it off the bottom of the screen. So from this point, from this point right here to this point down here is 75 pixels.
Okay, and then we fixed this before, but you see this, see the little on the sides, how that's not as wide. We fixed the padding before, but I don't, and so I maybe because
Okay, so your about section has a padding of 30 pixels.
here I did that because the other ones had 30 pixels, but when I did it, it didn't change.
So the only thing that doesn't have 30 pixels is probably your intro section. So if we put 30 pixels on your intro, or not, it's going to make a little liar out of me. I've
been like putting stuff in and taking it out because I was like, I don't want to mess something up.
All right, let's see where that's coming from. Container fluid, div.
Oh, wow. What is that? What are you doing? What is that called?
This is just the elements. And so whenever you hover over an element, it shows you where everything's coming from.
Okay.
So the problem is your header is in a container fluid, but none of this is in a container fluid, which is causing the problem.
Take the header out the container fluid?
Yeah, so if we go to your header and we take the container fluid out, because you've got, see, here's the problem. You've got a header that had a container fluid, and then you've got a div that also has a container on it. So you've got a header and a div, that's causing problems. So now we fixed part of it, but the problem is the about section and all the others probably don't have a container on them either. So now you're back to the right size, but now we need to be careful. You shouldn't have a header and a div and then a section, because there's nothing else here. So just be careful and think about semantically, what do we want our HTML to look like? Because you should at least get down to this. And ideally, you wouldn't have a header and a section. You would just take all of this stuff and put it right into the header. But I don't know if that's going to mess up your HTML. So I'm going to leave it as is.
You know what? I thought I had to have, remember we were doing something and we were like, it has to be in a div. Then it has to be a main div. That was when we pulled everything out of, maybe that's app.js I'm thinking about.
So it's a good idea for your site to be in a container, but you should never have a container in a container ever.
Right. And I think it came from having the original, moving it, working on it, then changing my mind, and then moving it all again, and just thinking that I gotta have all these different things. Okay, last question in here. If you go into here, what does this connect to? What is this? What is that for?
So if you go over to the search tool here, you can do a search for wherever the class name equals something. So here are all the different places that you use a class name in your code. So what we can do is do a search for wherever you use the class name equal to red, and you never do. So I would guess, and let me just do a search for class equals red. Yeah, you don't use that either. So this is disconnected, and you can even, I don't know if you can tell it, but you don't use that anywhere. So that's now CSS that you're not using. You can just delete it and it shouldn't affect anything.
Okay, I wanted to ask before I deleted it because I didn't know. But yeah, I was thinking, why is this here? And I don't want anything red on
Well, yeah,
here.
and you can do a search for that, right? If you just say, hey, if I want to see all the times I use a class name equal to navbar, it will show you all the different places that you use a navbar.
Okay,
So that may be a helpful tool in the future to say, hey, I don't know if I'm actually using this code anywhere. Let me search the entire project and see if I can find it.
okay. Yeah, I know I had a lot of stuff that was extra, but I just wanted to figure, I was trying to figure out why or what. But I'm glad you told me about the container inside of a container because I definitely didn't know that. Okay. All right. That was my question.
Thank you.
Is there a point where we put our stuff on LinkedIn, or is that something we do with Laura?
What do you mean your stuff on LinkedIn?
Like, are we gonna put our
Portfolio?
on LinkedIn, or does
You can. You just want to make sure it's deployed before you put your portfolio up there.
oh, well, will Nathan go over that next week or no?
He's going to go over deploying, I think, the blog project, and then the homework's going to be your capstone. And then if you want practice, you can deploy your portfolio.
And then once it's deployed, I can just put that link on LinkedIn?
Yep.
Oh, okay, okay. Cool beans.
Other questions? I don't know if you can hear it. I'm in a squeaky chair.
I can ask another one. So I
Go
have
for
my interview tomorrow.
Okay.
And I've been looking stuff up, like I can discuss vocabulary, but how much do I need to know? We didn't get to talk about this a lot, but like when I'm talking to this person, I know he'll know that I'm saying vocabulary words with definition. Like, how comfortable do you feel like I should be when I'm having this conversation?
So you'll either, the goal is that the interviewer is as honest as you are, right? So the goal here is not to BS the interviewer, but to let them know where your level of knowledge is. And in return for that honesty, they will be honest with you. So some interviewers, some mock interviewers we have are senior full stack developers who know what all the buzzwords are in the industry, but also know what the actual vocabulary is. And, when you say JSON, they will know what you're talking about of JavaScript object notation. But we may have some mock interviewers who are on maybe more of the HR side of things, or work with an engineering team, and they may not know the lingo, but they will also let you know that, right? And they also probably will not be asking you questions where they don't know the answers themselves. So you can go in and you can use that lingo, but be prepared for the interviewer to say, great, no problem, I agree with you, or say, hey, just a heads up, I'm not a technical person myself. I'm interviewing for a technical role, but I may not know the terminology itself. And they should be pretty honest about that.
Okay. I know more than I did before, but I don't know. I feel like it's the first one. We can do up to 4, right?
Yeah, yep. I
Okay.
think Laura has told another student at least 2 up to 4, but if there are more slots available with people, there's nothing stopping you from using them.
Okay.
Nicole, I would say shoot for getting your db.js and a model created first. Those are the 2 things that you really want to focus on. And just look at either the list backend or basically any backend that we've done with Sequelize should have db.js and at least a model set up in it. So the most recent one that I did was the list backend, but it doesn't really matter which one you end up doing. But I would say get those 2 done first. And then after that, you should have enough to deploy for Nathan. And then if you still need help, you can schedule a one-on-one with me.
Wait, so are you on vacation next week or?
I am working Wednesday and Thursday next week, or this upcoming week.
Booking Wednesday and Thursday.
My Calendly should block out the times that I'm not available. So if Calendly says it's available, by all means, go schedule it. Larry, go ahead.
Desktop 3. All right, so I tried to print out. Actually, it's saying when I tried to run it, it said that items is not iterable.
From your calendar, 8:57, capstone check-in, careers and code cohort 3, spring 2022.
You probably need data. So items is here, but items I think has an array of items inside of it, just looking at 42. So it would probably be better to rename line 35 instead of items, call that data.
Okay.
And then in your loop on 37, you would need data.items instead of just items.
All right, thank you.
Doug, go ahead.
Okay, let me share my screen. So just one of many questions I have.
Sure.
I was getting a warning about this return. It's saying that the map needs to have a return, and I was wondering if that's because it's in a conditional, so it doesn't always return something.
Yes. Yes,
So I tried saying else return, just return, and it didn't like that either.
You've got to return something. So if you return an empty object or an empty string or something like that, that would be enough. But are you using the values of the return of the map somewhere? Because oftentimes a map always has to return something. And if you return nothing, it will still show up in your resulting array.
Can you say that one more time?
So when you return from the map, do you then take can you show me your .map code?
You mean this right here?
Where were you getting the warning, on what line?
Oh, is this at 38? Yeah.
Are you sharing the right monitor? We're looking at your LinkedIn in the background and the pointer move.
LinkedIn in the back. Oh, maybe let me try again.
Ah, that's much better. Okay. Yeah. So it is definitely, you are correct it is that if statement that is causing the map to not return. So you should be able to do
else return something empty.
let me try so if this is true, the return is going to run. So you don't actually need the else. If you wanted to, you can for syntax purposes. But
Right.
let's just see what happens if you return null, because I believe React will ignore things that are null. And that seemed to do it.
Yes.
So you do have to always return something, but the thing that you return can be null. And in React, if the item is null, it knows not to render it.
Okay. Thank you. That explained that.
And if you wanted to, you could put it in an else. It's purely a syntactic decision opinion.
Oh, right, right. I understand how this works.
Cool.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, go for it. No one else has their hands up.
So I've been having trouble wrapping my head around when things get rebuilt or reloaded.
Mm-hmm.
Like for instance, I tried to make a variable. I said let start map with, I had let start map with and start map height. And then in this function, I set a value to it, but then when I would come back, it was like getting reset to 0. Let me ask a straightforward question. So for instance, with this use effect, I want this to happen every time the zoom changes. And I was getting warnings that these function names need to be in my dependencies list. So I don't quite understand what, like, can you not call a function outside of use effect from use effect?
So quite a technical answer that I don't know I am qualified to give you. I am going to do a quick search on the question I asked was, when do I use functions in a hooks dependency array? And the short answer is whenever the linter tells you to. And that could be fairly often. But why does it tell you to do that sometimes and not always? So I'm going to put that in the chat, and I will also Slack it to you, Doug. And if you find an interesting answer and want to surmise it for me, I would gladly listen.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I would like to try to.
You're borderlining on both the use ref with .current and the use callback and use memo hooks, all of which start to go over my head. I shouldn't say they all go over my head, but I have definitely wrestled with .current before. And you get into this weird territory of, should it be state? Should it be a ref with a current? Or should it be a just a straight up variable in my class or outside of the component? And you run into weird things when you start bridging the DOM, because basically what you're running into with .current is that you're essentially bypassing the React virtual DOM and using the DOM built into the browser directly. And that's essentially the way I understand .current.
Okay. Yeah, I ended up using that because I was just trying to use variables, but it seemed like I couldn't, they kept getting overwritten or reinitialized or.
Yeah, you are doing battle with the virtual DOM, and based off of what I have seen of your project, I'm not surprised that you need to be using .currents, but also there is probably a more reacty way to refactor the map so that you wouldn't have to do that, and you could just rely on state.
Right, well, that's what I was trying to think of, but I was like, well, let me just get it working and then I can start pulling it apart.
Yep.
But all right, well, thank you for the link. I will read up.
Yeah, it is I'm sending you the link not out of, oh, I don't want to bore everyone. I'm sending you the link out of, I don't know the answer.
All right, well, the more I can wrap my head around any of React, the better.
Yep. You are definitely leaving beginner React territory. And with React, there seems to only be two levels, either, oh, I'm still learning this and I kind of really get it, or you're in the deep end and there's an iceberg approaching. So two different levels of React, and unfortunately not much in between.
I want to go back to the shallow end.
Nicole, go ahead.
I just have more of a general question for myself.
Yeah.
So for my portfolio, it should all be popping up just like how the other one is. And I should have a few of my previous assignments up there, right?
Yep.
Then for my capstone, I should have my front page, a login page, and a back end.
Yep.
And like 90% of homework done, and then 90% of Laura, and up to up to 2 interviews.
Minimum of 2, maximum of 4.
Okay. But that all sounds about right.
Yep, sounds like you're on track. And turning in your capstone by tomorrow. Well, not turning in, but checking in your capstone before tomorrow's class.
Okay.
So if you've got the front end page, the login page, and a back end up and running for your capstone, you will be perfect for tomorrow's check-in. If
Okay.
you are on the way there and you can show, hey, I've got a back end, but maybe the login code isn't working, and oh, I've got a routing page and some front end done, but like the point of the check-in tomorrow is not to be like, turn it in and you're done working on it. The point of the capstone tomorrow is to be like, hey, I've wrestled with the back end, I've wrestled with the front end, and I'm able to show progress on that. And that's all you need for a meeting expectations tomorrow.
Okay, perfect.
Doesn't all need to work. It just all needs to be a work in progress.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Larry, go ahead. There are shelves behind me, and it's so interesting to see the virtual background just make my arm be like floating back there, and it's not even picking up what I'm resting it on.
All right, so
It really is.
I was able to create the file, but now it just looks like a bunch of googly goop.
Okay, well, this is major progress. So now what you want to do is, well, hold on. Let me ask a question. Do you want this to be prettified JSON, or do you want this to be JSON, but only the fields that you care about?
I like both, I guess, if that makes sense. So I would like it to be pretty.
Okay.
When I do my model, I'm going to pull out the fields that I care about.
Okay, so let me request remote control, and this is one of the benefits of working with a different developer is you learn things that you didn't even know were an option. And one of them is you can use the spaces parameter when you stringify. So if I go to here, when you print out the JSON content, you pass an option of null and then the number of spaces you would like to show up for each tab. So you can see this is add indentation, white space, and line break characters to the return value of the JSON text to make it easier to read. So if you rerun your index.js for me.
Okay. Let's see. Too many screens. So NPM stop, Control C, npm start.
It is doing some serious JSON calls, isn't it?
All
Okay.
right.
And now go to your items.json. Aha.
Thank you.
That was one that I did not know was even like I've only ever used one parameter with JSON.stringify. And when the senior developer working on my team showed me that you could just literally pass in the number of spaces that you wanted, and it would essentially pretty print your JSON, I was like,
Thank you.
and then the other thing you can do is if you don't want all of that data and you just want the fields that you care about, instead of pushing in the entire item, you can push in a curly brace, a new object essentially, and only put in the fields that you care about.
So on where are we at?
Yeah, so in final items.push item, instead of pushing the whole item in, you could do a curly brace in there instead, and then say like price : item dot price, comma name : item dot name.
To push the objects. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Because item itself is an object, it's just an object with a lot of fields. So what you're doing is essentially making a new object, only putting in the fields that you want, and then using the field names from the item itself.
So it'd be, so I would say price and then : item dot price and comma, so on and so forth.
You got
All
it.
right. Thank you. Now I guess I don't have to be scared of those million files now. All right.
And this step, by the way, I'm very glad that you thought of, oh, maybe I should put this in my own JSON file, because we deal with just a real world example. When we pulled in the FDA database of all the medications in the FDA, it was, I think, 14 gig worth of JSON files. And so when we were working on parsing that into our database, we actually got it all working, deployed it to the server, and crashed the server. Well, my computer has 32 gigs of RAM, but our server only has 3. And so when it hit a RAM limit and ended up crashing our whole production web server. So while I was working on those imports, I'm like, okay, it literally takes me 6 minutes to download these files, and that's on a gigabit fiber connection. Like that, I can't debug and try something new and have to wait a full 6 minutes to see if my code is now working. So that's what we ended up doing, was modifying our script to say, hey, if we want fresh data, go download it. But if we don't, go check to see if those files already exist. And if they do, use those files instead of doing a full download.
Okay, nice.
Christy, go ahead.
I feel bad because my questions are not as complex as everyone else's.
They are just as what's the opposite of frustrating? They're just as gratifying when you get them solved as anyone else's answers are when they get them solved. So
Okay, so
it's looking good. First of all, you're making good progress.
all right, so this is my question. Why? Because I gotta learn more about the database, but like after I put the price, you see the price here? Why do I have like comma, and this?
Go to your
like,
JSX. Go to your HTML and your React.
Go to my in here. Wait, no.
In favorites. Because you've got the summary and then a comma and then a price and then 2 commas.
Oh, so should that be a break? So can I do a break?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, instead of a comma?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know what that was. I was like, where did this come from? I never thought to look here. Okay. All right, that was my question.
Larry, go ahead.
Okay, so right now, it's only getting the items from one store. And if I wanted to append to that JSON item list file, how would I go about doing that?
My advice would be to make an items file for every different store. So I
Okay.
would have items dash store 123 and then items dash. It is very hard because you can't, if you think about it, it's not really just appending JSON, it's modifying the array that's in that JSON, right? Because you don't want to just add a new array at the end. You want to push the items onto the existing items array. So in order to do that, you have to read the whole file, parse the JSON back into an array, then add the items to the array, and then rewrite the file. And while that is not impossible to do, it would just be easier if you're saying, hey, I'm going to do 5 stores. Let me just have 5 different JSON files.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
No, but I was still struggling on my list and get the link. Can you just show me how to put the link in?
Go ahead.
Or 1 second, it's gonna take me.
Oh, no.
Oh, hold on. Oh, wait, do we even have time?
Yeah, we got 10 minutes. You're good.
I think I opened your list running. I wonder what I think I just named mine's list. Window. Okay, let's share.
Christy either broke something or got everything working.
Right. I want to show you again. I'm so excited.
Okay, you can show because mine's really not that.
Well, hold on. No. Before we go to your shoes.
I don't know.
No. This is your shoes, right? You're talking about the list. That's the problem. Or no, this is the right one. This is the right one.
Yeah, this is my list of
Okay,
shoes.
so your shoes is fetching everything. It's looping over everything, and then it's linking to things properly. Then in your app, you've got your shoe and your ID, and your shoe and your ID. So all of that's right. Then in here, you get your params. The only thing you're not doing is there aren't multiple shoes to map over here.
Yeah, but it still wasn't working. Like I put the extra S there to see if it. Oh,
that one I want to leave. What we want to do is you said set shoe, and the data coming back from the shoes. Do you have your backend open? Here, let me.
no.
Okay, so I'm guessing. Let me see if it's in your recents list.
You go to more. I think more, and then list backend is right there.
Okay, so your server sends back one shoe in particular.
Mhm.
So whatever the one shoe we're getting back is, that's what we need to use when we set the shoe coming out of the data. Now there's only one shoe in the data here, so we should be able to do something like the shoe name, and we don't need a key anymore because we're not looping over everything. But then your shoe also has something like the size and the color, so we can also do an LI for the shoes shoe dot size and the shoe dot color. Oh, come on.
I don't press enter anymore.
I'm not even pressing enter.
No.
Okay, now the important thing that Christy always forgets to do, our front end won't work until our back end is up and running. Now, hopefully you don't have anything else running.
I do
on-
right now.
No, you don't.
Oh. I guess not.
Oh, I don't need an npmi, but I'll run it anyway. So now,
Uh-oh. Yeah, I was giving myself a rerun of UState and USEFAC and params again, even though it's been explained to me, but I'm trying to get it to stick. So yeah.
that's fine.
Don't-
Just a little import. Okay, now here are all of your shoes, and if you open one of them, boo.
It used to say shoe there though. Like what did I change to where when you click it don't say, it used to say shoe for each page and now it just does that. Well, it wasn't even doing that before.
Okay, well, let's look. Okay, so doc type is not valid means you've got some error in your shoe params ID. Await shoe ID. See anything wrong? Let me go look here. Crash. Maybe you were right. Maybe you do have something else on your, okay, shoe ID 2. Oh, no. Yeah, you've got something else.
Am I in my other one?
I'm gonna stop this and stop this. Can you open any other VS Code windows that you have open? Yeah, well, that doesn't have anything though.
Sometimes it does this and I go into the activity monitor. Hold on, this is in
Yeah,
there.
go for it. That's a good idea.
And I just close everything though. So if that's gonna help.
If you go to activity monitor and do a search for node. And go to the CPU tab instead of the memory tab.
Oh.
No, it's literally not loading. Okay, hold on. I've got another idea. Let me take back over.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, here's your problem. You're going to 3000. 3000 is your front end. You're telling your front end to look at the front end. You need to
Okay.
look at 3001 there. So run start. And there are
So
your
why
shoes.
does that look okay? So now it's on my local host.
Now you're
3000.
saying, hey, my front end, which is on 3000, should go to my back end 3001 to get the shoe information.
Okay, thank you so much.
Oh, and you were asking where did your like each one for a shoe go? That's, you probably just removed it here. So if you, oh my God, Max, why do I always do that? Now your shoe is back here if that's what you're looking for.
And I don't need to style this. I could just hand it in, right?
Yeah, this is fine.
All right. Thank
If you understand this, if you can like read this code from top to bottom, both on the front end and back end and understand it, you get full credit for this assignment.
Okay. All right.
Larry, before you go, Christy, go ahead and show off.
I have a
Where's my question?
question.
Did you say you forgot your question, Larry?
I'm trying to remember it.
Oh, okay, see, I put the break in and it's flowing, it's flowing. So I'm
Nice.
not- So here's my quick question, because I have the same thing. I don't know why I was doing this, but like, look, I have a div, a class name, container fluid, div, class name.
Bad Christy. Bad Christy. I'm gonna get out the spray bottle. No containers.
So I can take, do I need a header?
No, especially because, oh, well, a header is probably good semantic HTML, but you don't need a section inside of your header.
So can I get rid of these two divs?
Yeah, so what I would do is, now this may break your CSS because I don't know what you've targeted in here, but I don't think you want a container or a container fluid. I think this class name is all that you care about. So I would take this because this is what's moving all of your stuff around. I would delete out all of this and all of this, and I would just say your header comprises of one each one, and that header not only has a class name or doesn't need the container fluid, it just needs all of that stuff to align it properly.
But then wouldn't I put something so that I can change the text? I just want to be able to change the text. So
Yeah.
what I call it like?
Then in here, you could do an ID of intro or header or whatever you wanted.
Okay, cool beans. That's all. Oh, I just noticed that when I was fixing something, I'm like, oh, here we go again with a header and a div and a section and a whole bunch
They
of
call that div soup because it's so all over the place and you've got so many divs. Much better to use semantic elements instead of divs, and then don't put a div in unless you need it, right? If it's actually dividing something up, sometimes you need that many divs. But if it's not separating out content, don't put in divs for the sake of putting in divs.
And then in JavaScript, when you use a break, you have to use a closing break too. You have to use the break and the closing break.
No, you can just do a break as a self-closing tag.
Oh, I had the slash in the wrong spot. Okay, I got you.
Self-closing goes at the end because it's closing out the tag for you.
I got you. Okay, thank you.
You might want to delete that break that I just put in there. Otherwise, you're going to be like, where's that space coming from?
No, right?
Larry,
Right.
go ahead.
I remember. So for my data, the stores have a particular ID, and then the items that belong to that store have the ID and the items data. So when I go to build my database, I know I'm going to include the ID in the store data. For the items, I would include that in there and make that a foreign key.
Oh, that's a Doug famous loaded question. So the question is, do you rely on the data coming in as a foreign key and you can use it as that, or is it better to store that ID so you have it for reference, but then use all of your internal database IDs, the database you generate, so that the data stays more consistent? And so the reasoning behind that is what happens when Wegmans decides that they're no longer selling a product. Well, they may delete that ID, but in your database, you've got some reference to it that's saying, hey, this store ID has, Wegmans brand ketchup. Well, when Wegmans stops making ketchup, what happens to your database now when their database changes? And so oftentimes a database engineer will tell you, even if a data has an ID point, store it, but then use your own IDs to reference the stores table to the items table.
Okay. And then the second part to that is I'm going to make a list. So each user should be able to have a list. And the list is going to pick from the store list, from the store they want to get the items from, and then their items list. So should that list just be a join once they start entering the items? I say, okay, we'll add this to the list. Should that be based from a join?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll make it separate.
The users list is going to be a table, right? Users lists can be the name of the table. And all it's going to do is, as long as the user can only have one active list, it is only going to store the list item and the user ID.
So the list item and then the IDs for both of them?
The ID for the user and the ID for the item of the list. The item being added to the list.
All right, so the user ID would be attached to the list, and then it doesn't really matter what store it would. Basically, once they pick the store, it would just go get the items from that particular store and put in the list. So I just need the user ID and then the item itself.
Yep.
Okay, and
the item is going to be an ID as well. It's going to effectively be a bridge table. It's going to bridge the user to the item.
User ID. ID. All right.
Yeah. So if I've got item 1, 1, 5, and 10 in my list, what the the list items table is going to look like is it's going to have 3 rows and my user ID 111 in all 3 of the rows. But then the list item is going to be 1, 5, and 10 in those rows.
Okay.
And
Thank
then
you.
you're going to do a double join on that table to say, hey, I may need the user, or I may just say, hey, go get me all the list items, left outer join the item information into the item ID where the user ID equals 1. And that's going to get you all of the items in my list.
Okay, thank you.
And Max, what would you like us to have turned in? Again, you said the a login page, a back end, and a front end. What?
So,
I'm sorry. What
I
did you
hate
say?
to be that rigid because you may decide, hey, my capstone doesn't need a login page, right? Or you may say like, hey, all I'm doing is doing something like the portfolio where like I'm putting items into my database, and then when I load my front end, those items show up. So really what I want to see is a front end done with some kind of design or pages or some front end that's showing us, hey, my front end is making progress. A back end done that is connecting to SQLize and a database, and then some piece of information flowing from the back end to the front end.
All right.
Or your front end making some call to a third-party API, either of those two.
So mine is not going to have the third part. Like mine is I had to build my own database and to pull from.
Yep.
So that's what I'm in the process of doing now. Question, and this is just like, do some people do all the coding and semantics first and then make it look pretty, and then
Absolutely.
And then okay, I felt because I
Or
have a
you can
tendency
be a
to
developer like me who gets it all working and then says, yeah, this is pretty enough, and sends it out anyway.
okay. Okay. All right.
No,
I think
I mean,
I have
snide
focused
answer
on
aside, I mean, I've always been able to make a functional interface and an
Mhm.
interface that doesn't look bad, but I would never have said I made an interface that looked pretty. And
Mhm.
so I use off-the-shelf components. I use Bootstrap, or I actually use a library called Material UI. But I got to the point where I went, I'm not a designer. I don't know how to make these things look pretty. And that is an art form in itself and its own job title and career. So
Yeah.
what I went out and I hired someone for my team. And that's why our interface looks pretty, is because they design it and code it.
Right. Okay. All right. All right. So you pretty much, it was funny. So the questions that Nicole was asking were things that I needed. So that was perfect. And I'm going to go work on that stuff now so I can send
Awesome.
it in.
And this recording will be up in 30 minutes on YouTube in case you need to go back and reference it.
Okay.
I have
Thank you.
last question, quick.
Yep.
With the cards, is there a way to make, I just need a direction. Is there a way to make the cards all the same size, all a standard size?
You want to put a max height or a max width on your image. The other thing that you're going to run into is that your text is going to be all different lengths. And so that will also push on there as well. So you've got 2 options rolling forward there. You can either say, hey, all of my cards are going to be a height of 400 pixels. And if there's a little white space at the top or bottom or whatever, I'm going to just center the text so that they're all the same size. The other option is looking into a library like Masonry.js, where even if the cards are a different size, they will all flow together as if you were creating a mosaic tile together.
That's what I originally was trying to do. I saw that wasn't Bootstrap. Is Masonry, is that in Bootstrap or no?
No, it's called Masonry.js. You can either schedule a one-on-one with me, or if you are sick of me, I just showed Latonia how to use it like 3 weeks ago. So if you would like to reach out to Latonia, she might be able to help you as well.
I'm gonna get all the cards. I want to get all my cards first, and then I'll
Good idea.
figure that you said Wednesday. I should have them all together, or at least most of them by Wednesday or Thursday.
Cool.
I feel excited. I'm on the downslide. Like I'm really almost done.
Good.
I'm feeling very excited about this.
Nice. All right. Any final questions? Awesome. Well, have a great one, everyone.
Thank you.
Have fun with Nathan. I will see you guys next Monday.
Good night, y'all.
Have a great
Yeah.
week. Night, everyone.